How did you react to your kid's hidden empire? I genuinely believed I raised the ideal son. 17, honor roll, chess club, constantly safely in his room. Then a certified letter from the IRS arrived at 11:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, demanding $84,500 in unpaid capital gains taxes for an LLC registered to my address. I panicked. I assumed my boy, Tyler, was the victim of identity theft. He was a frail kid with chronic asthma who spent his weekends carefully painting miniature fantasy figurines. He barely spoke above a whisper at the dinner table. To clear this up, I needed his social security card. I went into his room and forced open the bottom drawer of his vintage oak desk with a flathead screwdriver. There was no social security card. Instead, I found a heavy, matte black Alienware laptop sitting on top of a digital money counting machine. I cracked the laptop open. Tyler used our golden retriever's birth year for his password since he was 10. It took me 2 tries to unlock the desktop. What I found completely shattered my reality. Tyler wasn't painting figurines. He was operating a massive, highly sophisticated sports betting and loan sharking syndicate right out of our suburban home. I opened a spreadsheet titled Outstanding Accounts. It listed hundreds of local college students. Beside their names were staggering amounts of debt, interest rates that would make a cartel boss blush, and terrifying notes. If Brandon doesn't pay the $4,000 by Friday, repo his Honda Civic. My hands were shaking violently as I clicked into a hidden Telegram desktop application. The chat logs were a descent into madness. 3 weeks ago, he ordered 2 older men to smash the windows of a local sports bar because the owner refused to place his underground betting kiosks in the back room. My son, the boy who cried when we accidentally hit a squirrel with the car, had typed, "Make sure he's in the building when you break the glass. Let him feel it." I kept digging, my stomach churning with pure nausea. I found a locked photo album. There were pictures of Tyler wearing a $12,000 Audemars Piguet watch, sitting in the VIP section of an underground poker club in downtown Seattle. He was surrounded by massive, scarred bouncers who looked like they took orders directly from him. In one video, he was aggressively screaming at a terrified man twice his age, slamming a metal baton onto a concrete table to emphasize his threats. The ruthless, gravelly tone in his voice was completely unrecognizable. This wasn't my introverted teenager. This was a monster. The final straw was a live location ping that popped up on the screen at 7:15 p.m. It was a calendar alert. Final collection, Pier 44 warehouse. Tyler had told me he was attending an overnight robotics team workshop at the high school. I didn't even grab my coat. I sprinted to my Ford F-150, my heart hammering against my ribs. The drive to the waterfront took 20 agonizing minutes. The rain was coming down in sheets, making the industrial district look like a graveyard. I pulled into the shadow of the abandoned shipping warehouse. I expected to drag my son out of there by his collar and ground him until the end of time, but I was entirely too late. Before I could even put the truck in park, the warehouse doors blew open. Brilliant blue and red strobe lights shattered the darkness. 3 armored SWAT vehicles had already surrounded the loading dock. I watched in absolute horror through my rain-streaked windshield as heavily armed federal agents swarmed the area. They dragged a line of grown men out in handcuffs, and right at the front of the line, completely unbothered, was Tyler. He wasn't crying. He wasn't having an asthma attack. He was wearing a tailored Italian trench coat, glaring at the tactical officers with cold, calculated arrogance. Yesterday afternoon, I visited him at the King County Correctional Facility. We sat on opposite sides of a thick, smudged glass partition. I waited for an apology, a tear, a sign of the boy I raised. Instead, he picked up the heavy plastic telephone, leaned forward, and smirked. "Don't look at me like that," Tyler said, his voice dripping with venom. "I made more money by my 16th birthday than you'll see in 3 lifetimes at your pathetic accounting firm. I don't need a father. I need a better lawyer." He hung up the phone and walked back to his cell, leaving me staring at a stranger. I sat there for 20 minutes after they let him away. The guard eventually tapped on the glass with a wedding ring that made a sharp, rhythmic clink times against the pane. He didn't say anything, just gestured toward the exit. I walked out into the Seattle gray, the humidity sticking to my skin like a second layer of grief. I'm an accountant. I deal in balances, in things that make sense when you add them up, but my life was currently a ledger where every single entry was a lie. I drove home in silence. When I walked through the front door, the house felt cavernous. I looked at the little display case in the hallway where Tyler kept his chess trophies. 3rd place, state finals, 2022. I remembered how he'd looked that day small, blinking behind his glasses, holding that plastic gold-plated knight like it was the holy grail. I had hugged him and felt his ribs through his blazer. How does that kid turn into someone who orders a man's business to be destroyed while he's inside it? I went back into his room. The desk I'd pried open was still there, the wood splintered around the lock. I hadn't just broken a drawer, I'd broken the seal on a world I wasn't prepared for. I sat on his bed, the sheets still smelled like laundry detergent and the faint, metallic scent of his inhaler, and I looked at the Alienware laptop. The IRS letter was still on the floor where I'd dropped it. $84,500. That was just the tip of the iceberg. If he owed that much in capital gains, the raw revenue was in the millions. My son wasn't just a bookie, he was a bank. I started scrolling through the laptop again, deeper this time. I needed to know if I was in danger. I needed to know if we times were in danger. I found a folder buried inside the system files, labeled infrastructure. It wasn't just gambling. Tyler had built a network of consultants, clients, mostly older guys with records, guys who clearly didn't mind taking orders from a kid as long as the crypto transfers hit their wallets on time. There was a series of messages from a week ago with a user named V-Man. The guy at the docks is asking questions about the overhead. Says he knows the owner of the LLC is a local, Tyler. Let him ask. If he gets loud, remind him about his daughter's tuition payments. I'm the one signing the checks now, not the university. Remind him he's an employee, not a partner. I felt a cold sweat prickle my neck. He was leveraging people's lives. My 17-year-old son was using a man's daughter's education as a leash. The front door chimed. My heart nearly exited my chest. I froze, listening. It was just the mail slot. I crept downstairs, my socks sliding on the hardwood. I peered through the sidelight window. A black sedan was idling at the curb. It wasn't a police car. It was just a car. It sat there for 3 minutes, the exhaust puffing white in the cool evening air. Then it slowly rolled away. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the kitchen with a mug of black coffee that went cold before I finished it. Around 3 a.m., the phone rang. The landline. We almost never use the landline. I picked it up. Hello? Silence for a beat. Then, a man's voice. It wasn't Tyler. It was deep, weary, and sounded like it had been through a meat grinder. Mr. Henderson? Who is this? I asked. My voice sounded thin, even to me. Your son owes people things that aren't on his spreadsheets, the voice said. The feds took his hardware, but they didn't take his obligations. He made promises for the Saturday games. Big ones. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, my hand cramping around the receiver. Tyler is in custody. Talk to the police. The police don't pay out at 3-to-1 odds, Mr. Henderson. Tyler was the escrow. He's got the keys to the offshore accounts. We know he didn't give them up yet. We saw the arrest. He was too calm. He's got a plan, but his plan doesn't include us getting our cut. I don't have his passwords. I lied. I thought of the golden retriever's birth year. 1209. You're an accountant, right? You understand how this works. If the bank closes, the depositors get angry. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. I looked around my kitchen. The granite countertops we'd picked out 3 years ago, the stainless steel fridge covered in magnets from our trips to the Oregon coast, the little chalkboard where my wife, before she passed, used to write the grocery list. It all looked like a movie set, flimsy, fake, ready to be knocked over. The next morning, I was at my office by 7 a.m. I couldn't be at home, but I couldn't work either. I sat in my cubicle at the firm and stared at a client's tax returns, the numbers blurring into gray smears. My boss, Bill, walked by and knocked on the partition. Heard about the trouble, Arthur. It's all over the local news. Teenage kingpin in Shoreline. Jesus, you okay? I'm fine, Bill. Just a misunderstanding, I said. It was the most pathetic lie of my life. The feds were here an hour ago, Bill said, his voice dropping. He stepped into my space and leaned in. They didn't want to talk to you. They wanted your access logs. They think some of the LLC filings were done from this IP address. Arthur, tell me you didn't know. I didn't, I said. And for the first time in 24 hours, it was the absolute truth. I thought he was painting figurines, Bill. I thought he was a nerd. Bill looked at me with a mix of pity and fear. They're freezing your personal accounts. Precautionary measure, they said. You might want to get a lawyer of your own. I left the office 5 minutes later. I went to the ATM at the corner. I slid my card in. Transaction declined. Contact financial institution. I had $42 in my wallet. My son had millions in crypto and offshore accounts, and I couldn't even buy a tank of gas. I drove to the jail again. I didn't have an appointment, but I waited. I sat in that plastic chair in the lobby for 4 hours until they told me I could have 10 minutes. When Tyler walked into the visitation room this time, he looked even more composed. He'd swapped the Italian coat for an orange jumpsuit, but he wore it like it was a power suit. He sat down and didn't even wait for me to pick up the phone. He just watched me through the glass, his eyes tracking my movements like a hawk. I picked up the receiver. Tyler, men are calling the house. They're asking for money. They mentioned the Saturday games. Tyler didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. Which one? Was it the guy with the raspy voice or the one who sounds like he's chewing on gravel? Does it matter? They're threatening me. They know where we live. Tyler leaned in close to the glass. His breath fogged a small circle on the pane. Listen to me very carefully, Dad. You need to go back to the house. In the garage, behind the stack of winter tires, there's a loose floorboard. Under it is a Pelican case. Inside that case is a satellite phone and a notebook. Do not turn the phone on. Just bring the notebook here next time. I'm not being a runner for you, Tyler. You're in jail. This is over. It's only over if I let it be over, he whispered, his voice cold and steady. The men calling you? They're small time. They're scared because they think the money is gone. If you don't bring me that notebook, they will come to the house. Not to talk. They'll come to find what they think is hidden there. I'm the only one who can call them off. Klain, you're 17, I said, my voice cracking. You're my son. I'm the guy who pays their mortgages. Tyler shot back. Now go home. Check the garage. And Dad, if you see a gray Lexus parked down the block, don't look at it. Just go inside. I hung up. I didn't have a choice. I drove home, my eyes constantly darting to the rearview mirror. I didn't see a gray Lexus, but as I turned onto our street, I saw a man standing on the sidewalk, holding a leash with no dog attached. He just stood there, staring at my house as I pulled into the driveway. I went straight to the garage. I moved the tires' heavy, salt-crusted Michelins. I found the loose board. My fingers were bleeding by the time I pried it up. The Pelican case was there, just like he said. I opened it. The notebook wasn't filled with numbers. It was filled with names. Names of people I knew. Our mailman, my dentist, the high school vice principal. Beside each name was a date and a dollar amount. And then I saw the last page. It was my name, Arthur Henderson. Beneath my name, Tyler had written, insurance, total invested, $15,000. He hadn't been using my identity. He had been investing in me. My mortgage payments that had mysteriously dropped last year, the tax refund I thought I'd gotten that seemed a little too high, it wasn't the government, it was him. He hadn't just built an empire. He'd made me a part of it without ever saying a word. I sat on the cold concrete of the garage floor, clutching the notebook of a boy I realized I had never actually met. The garage door creaked in the wind, and for the first time in my life, I was terrified of my own home. I closed the notebook. The sound of the thick leather cover snapping shut echoed in the garage. I didn't put it back in the Pelican case. I tucked it under my arm, stood up, and went back inside the house. I locked the deadbolt, then I locked the chain. I hadn't touched that brass chain since my wife, Sarah, passed away 5 years ago. I sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up. I didn't read the rest of the names in the notebook. I didn't need to. I already knew my entire life was compromised. The quiet, predictable existence I had meticulously built after Sarah's death was gone, replaced by a ledger of extortion and dirty money. By 9 a.m., the adrenaline burned off, leaving behind a cold, hard panic. Bill was right. My accounts were frozen. I was a target. I needed legal counsel. I pulled out my phone and dialed Dave Peterson. Dave and I played golf twice a year. He did corporate law downtown, mostly mergers and acquisitions. Dave, it's Arthur. Artie. Jesus. I saw the Times. It's on the front page of the Metro section. I need a name, Dave. Criminal defense. The best one you know. Someone who deals with federal white-collar cases. Dave paused. I could hear his secretary typing in the background. You want Martin Vane. He's a shark. But Artie, he requires a 50 grand retainer just to sit in the room with you. Just give me the number. I called Martin Vane's office. A paralegal answered, and when I gave my name, I was put on hold for exactly 14 seconds. When the line clicked back, it was a man's voice. Smooth, unhurried, dripping with the kind of confidence money buys. Mr. Henderson, Martin Vane, Mr. Vane, I need representation. My son, Tyler. Yes, I'm aware. Can I come see you? I asked, my voice tight. I know your retainer is steep, but my assets are currently frozen and Mr. Henderson, stop talking. Vane interrupted gently. You don't need to worry about my retainer. I'm already retained in this matter. My stomach dropped. By the federal government? Is this a conflict of interest? Vane let out a dry, humorless chuckle. No, Mr. Henderson, by your son. Tyler retained my firm 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Tyler was 16. He was a junior in high school. He had a top-tier criminal defense shark on retainer while I was still trying to get him to eat his vegetables at dinner. He retained you? Paid in full. $250,000 wired into our trust account from a corporate entity in the Caymans. He actually left instructions for me to expect your call if things went south. He told me to tell you that my services extend to you as long as you follow his directives. Follow his directives? He's a minor, I stammered, clinging to the only piece of logic I had left. He can't legally enter into a contract with you. He's an emancipated minor in the eyes of the corporate structure he built, Arthur, and the money cleared. I represent Tyler's interests. He wants me to keep you out of federal prison, so that's what I'll do. But you need to go see him today. I hung up the phone. The silence in my kitchen was deafening. I was a 45-year-old senior accountant with a spotless record, no parking tickets, and an immaculate credit score. And I was completely at the mercy of a teenage sociopath who slept down the hall. I took the notebook. I drove back to the King County Correctional Facility. I didn't want to. Every cell in my body screamed at me to drive to the FBI field office in Seattle, drop the notebook on their front desk, and beg for immunity. But I remembered the $214,000. I remembered my name on the LLC. The feds wouldn't see a victim. They'd see a money launderer. Tyler had engineered it perfectly. I went through security. I waited in the same sterile visitation room. When Tyler walked in, he didn't look at my face. He looked straight at my hands. He saw the slight bulge under my jacket where the notebook was tucked into my inner pocket. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He picked up the phone. I picked up mine. Did you bring it? He asked. Not hello. Not how are you holding up, Dad? I talked to Martin Vane, I said, ignoring his question. Tyler nodded slowly. Good. Marty's sharp. He's going to get the capital gains charge pleaded down to a corporate misfiling. The extortion stuff? They don't have the witnesses. The guys at the docks won't talk. They know what happens to their families if they do. Tyler, my name is on the LLC. You put my name on the filings. How did you even do that? He leaned back in his plastic chair, looking mildly bored. You're an accountant, Dad. A boring middle management numbers guy. You're the perfect cover. Nobody looks twice at a guy who wears sensible shoes and brings a bagged turkey sandwich to work. I needed an adult on the paperwork. You signed the incorporation documents last November. I never signed anything, I hissed, drawing a sharp look from the guard standing by the heavy steel door. I forced my voice down to a harsh whisper. I never signed a damn thing for you. Remember the FAFSA forms? Tyler said, his voice completely flat. The early financial aid applications I brought you to sign in the kitchen? I was so stressed about college. You were so proud of me for being proactive. I felt all the blood leave my face. The FAFSA forms. It was a Tuesday night. I was making pasta. He had slid a stack of papers onto the island, pointing to the yellow highlighted tabs where I needed to sign. I had wiped my hands on a dish towel and signed them without reading the boilerplate text. Page 4, Dad, Tyler said softly. You really should read things before you put your name on them. He had slipped the signature page for the LLC into a stack of college financial aid documents. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. I gave you everything. I raised you by myself. I paid for your asthma medication, your chess tournaments. Why would you do this to me? Tyler looked at me, his face devoid of anything resembling human empathy. Because I needed a fire firewall, and you were available. Don't take it personally. It's just business. Now, put the notebook flat against the glass. Turn to page 7. I sat paralyzed. If I showed him the notebook, I was actively participating in his operation. I was crossing a line I could never uncross. Tyler, I can't. His eyes went dead. The smug teenager vanished, replaced by the guy who ordered windows smashed and men beaten. Page 7, Dad. Or I make a phone call from the rec yard in 10 minutes, and that $214,000 I paid into your mortgage becomes public record. I'll have Marty leak it to the feds that we were partners. I'll tell them you ran the books. Who do you think they'll believe? The honor roll student who got in over his head, or the desperate widower accountant who needed to pay off his house? He had me. He had me completely boxed in. My own son had built a prison for me, brick by brick, right under my nose, and I had thanked him for being such a good kid while he did it. My hands shook violently as I reached inside my jacket. I pulled out the notebook. I flipped it open to page 7. I pressed the worn, yellow-lined paper against the thick, smudged glass. Tyler leaned in, his eyes scanning the page rapidly. He was memorizing names, account numbers, weaknesses. Okay, he said after 30 seconds. I got it. What is this? I asked, pulling the book back and shoving it into my coat. What did I just show you? That, Tyler said, standing up and smoothing down the front of his orange jumpsuit, was the list of people who are going to coordinate my bail by tomorrow morning. See you at home, Dad. Make sure my room is clean. He hung up the phone and walked away without looking back. I sat there staring at the empty chair on the other side of the glass. I had thought the worst part of all this was discovering who my son really was. I was wrong. The worst part was realizing I was now working for him. I left the jail and walked out into the damp Seattle afternoon. My truck was parked 3 blocks away. I felt physically sick, a deep, churning nausea that tasted like bile in the back of my throat. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but the rules had changed. I didn't have the luxury of ignoring the world anymore. I swiped right and put it to my ear. Arthur Henderson? It was a woman's voice. Crisp, professional, unforgiving. Yes, my name is Special Agent Miller with the FBI. We're currently executing a search warrant at your place of employment. Your boss, Bill, gave us your cell number. I stopped walking. The concrete sidewalk seemed to tilt beneath my feet. A passing car splashed water from a puddle onto my slacks, but I barely felt it. We found some interesting discrepancies in your firm's internal servers, she continued, her tone conversational but sharp as a scalpel. Encrypted traffic routed through offshore accounts that trace back to your specific workstation. Your login credentials, Arthur. Tyler didn't just use my name for the LLC. He had used my work computer. He had infected my career. Am I under arrest? I managed to ask, my throat so tight the words barely squeezed out. Not yet, Agent Miller said, but we have a lot of questions about the sports betting algorithms running on your firm's mainframe. I need you to come down to the Seattle field office right now. I need to call my lawyer. You can call whoever you want, Arthur, but if you aren't sitting in my lobby in exactly 1 hour, I'll send 2 cars with lights and sirens to find you. Don't make me do that. The line went dead before I could even process what she was saying. I lowered the phone. My reflection in a nearby puddle looked pale, distorted, like someone I didn't recognize. I had 45 minutes. I power walked to the truck. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my keys twice trying to unlock the door. I climbed in, slammed it shut, and just gripped the steering wheel for a full minute, breathing in the stale smell of old coffee and wet floor mats. I was a man who calculated risk for a living. I looked at spreadsheets and saw futures. I looked at my current situation and saw a concrete wall. The drive to downtown Seattle was a blur. The rain had picked up again, smearing the brake lights of the cars in front of me into long, bleeding red streaks. I parked in a paid garage 2 blocks from the federal building. I took the ticket from the machine and stared at it. I didn't even know if I'd be walking back to this truck. The FBI field office on 3rd Avenue is an intimidating piece of architecture. It doesn't look like a police station. It looks like a fortress made of glass and steel. I walked through the double doors, dripping wet, my coat clinging to my shoulders. The security checkpoint was identical to an airport. Take off your belt, empty your pockets, step through the scanner. Arthur Henderson, I told the guard at the front desk. My voice sounded hollow. Special Agent Miller is expecting me. He typed something into his computer, didn't look up, and printed a temporary badge. Have a seat. I didn't have to wait long. 2 minutes later, a woman walked out from behind the reinforced doors. She was in her late 30s, wearing a sharp navy suit, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. She looked like someone who hadn't slept a full 8 hours in a decade, but ran purely on black coffee and adrenaline. Mr. Henderson, she said. She didn't offer her hand. I'm Agent Miller. Follow me. I followed her down a long, beige hallway. The carpet absorbed the sound of our footsteps. It felt like walking into a tomb. We entered a small, windowless conference room. There was a metal table, 3 chairs, and a camera mounted in the upper corner. Another agent, a man with broad shoulders and a thick neck, was already sitting at the table. He was sliding a manila folder toward the center. Have a seat, Arthur, Miller said, taking the chair across from me. This is Agent Cho. Do you want water? Coffee? I want to know what's going on, I said, sinking into the hard plastic chair. I want to know why you were at my firm. Miller opened the folder. She didn't pull out photos of the warehouse. She didn't pull out photos of the bouncers or the loan sharking victims. She pulled out printouts of code, strings of IP addresses, server logs, and transaction hashes. You've been at the firm for what, 22 years? Miller asked, leaning forward on her elbows. 23? I corrected automatically. Senior tax consultant, Cho chimed in, his voice deep and raspy. Spotless record. You manage accounts for some of the biggest logistics companies in the Pacific Northwest. You know how money moves. You know how to hide it. You know how to make dirty money look clean. I do tax compliance, I said, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. I keep companies legal. I don't hide anything. Miller slid a piece of paper across the metal table. It was a server log from my office computer. This is a backdoor script. It was installed on your workstation 6 months ago. It routes automated queries into your firm's mainframe, utilizing your company's secure server architecture to process millions of microtransactions a second. Sports betting algorithms, Arthur, real-time odds calculation, automated payout routing, cryptocurrency tumbling, all of it funneling through an LLC registered in your name. I stared at the paper, the numbers blurred. Tyler, I whispered. He used my computer. I work from home 3 days a week. My laptop is usually on the kitchen island. He must have installed it when I wasn't looking. Agent Cho let out a short, cynical laugh. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. You're sticking with the my teenager as an evil genius's defense? That's what we're going with? I looked up confused. It's the truth. He's 17. He built this whole thing. Miller's expression hardened. All trace of conversational courtesy vanished. She tapped her pen against the metal table. Arthur, let me tell you what this looks like from our side of the table. We get an anonymous tip about a massive illegal sportsbook and loan sharking operation running out of Shoreline. We raid the drop point. We arrest a 17-year-old kid. We seize his laptop. The laptop is a thin client. It's just a terminal. It doesn't hold the actual data or the money. The money is being routed through an offshore entity in the Caymans. She pulled out another piece of paper. This one had my name highlighted in yellow. We pull the incorporation documents for the LLC. Your signature is on them. We track the server ping. It leads directly to your desk at a high-end accounting firm. And then we look at your personal finances. For the last year, a shell company has been paying down your mortgage, inflating your tax returns, and quietly depositing a total of $214,000 into your accounts. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. Tyler hadn't just built a firewall. He hadn't just used me as a cover. He framed me. He's a kid, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He's a child. He paints figurines. He's the perfect fall guy, Agent Cho corrected, his voice dripping with disgust. That's what he is. You built a multi-million-dollar syndicate. You used your firm's servers because you knew their security protocols inside and out. And when you realized the feds were sniffing around the docks, you threw your own son to the wolves. You let him sit at the drop point. You let him take the arrest, knowing full well a 17-year-old with no priors gets a slap on the wrist while you keep the offshore accounts full. No, I gasped, actually pushing myself back from the table. No, you have this entirely wrong. He's a monster. I visited him in jail. He threatened me. He told me he retained Martin Vane. We know about Martin Vane, Miller said smoothly. Vane's retainer was paid from the same Cayman account that's been paying your mortgage. It's a very smart play, Arthur. Hiring a high-profile lawyer for the boy makes it look like the boy has the money. It's a great narrative. The teenage kingpin. The media loves it. We almost bought it until we saw the math. She tapped the server logs again. The routing on these transactions, the tax loss harvesting applied to the crypto transfers. A kid doesn't know how to do that, Arthur. But a guy with 23 years of corporate tax experience does. This is professional work. This is your time's work. I felt the room start to spin. I looked at the printouts. I recognized the formatting. I recognized the logic. It was my logic. Tyler had spent his entire life watching me work. He had asked me questions over dinner for years. Dad, how do offshore accounts avoid double taxation? Dad, how do shell companies mask beneficial ownership? I thought he was taking an interest in my career. I thought we were bonding. He wasn't bonding. He was taking notes. He was reverse engineering my brain to build his empire, and he built it in my exact style so that if it ever fell apart, the forensics would point directly to me. I want a lawyer, I said. My mouth was so dry the words felt like sandpaper. You can have one, Miller said, but understand the reality of the situation right now. We are going to freeze everything you own. We are going to seize your house. We are going to indict you on federal racketeering charges, money laundering, and tax evasion. You are looking at 20 years in federal prison, Arthur. She leaned in, her eyes locking onto mine. Unless you give us the keys to the offshore wallets. Right now. You give us the crypto keys, you cooperate, and maybe we can talk to the U.S. attorney about keeping you in a minimum security facility. But if you play dumb, if you keep pretending your asthmatic kid is Pablo Escobar, we will bury you. I stared at her. The utter impossibility of the situation settled over me like a heavy, suffocating blanket. They wanted the keys. The men on the phone last night wanted the keys. The keys that held millions of dollars in untraceable cryptocurrency. And I didn't have them. Tyler had them. And Tyler was sitting in a county jail cell, perfectly content to let his father drown. I don't have the keys, I said, the truth tasting like ashes in my mouth. I swear to God I don't have them. Cho slammed his hand on the metal table, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the small room. Stop lying, Henderson! Your kid is sitting in county telling anyone who will listen that he was just running errands for his dad. He's terrified. He's playing the victim perfectly. He's terrified. I almost laughed. A hysterical, broken sound bubbled up in the back of my throat. Tyler wasn't terrified. He was executing phase 2. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was manipulating the FBI just as easily as he manipulated the college kids he loaned money to. Agent Miller, I said, forcing myself to look her in the eye. If you arrest me, if you take my house, you still won't find the money because I don't have it. My son is playing you. He's playing all of us. Miller stared at me for a long, quiet moment. She wasn't angry like Cho. She was calculating. She was looking for the tell. Stand up, Arthur, she said said quietly. Are you arresting me? No, she said. Not today. We need more than circumstantial routing logs to make a RICO charge stick. And you know that. You're a smart guy. You built the firewall well, but you can't go back to your office. The firm terminated your employment 20 minutes ago. The finality of the statement hit me like a physical blow. 23 years, wiped out in a single morning. You're free to go, Miller said, standing up and gathering the folders. But don't leave the city. And Arthur? We'll be watching the house. If you try to move that money, we'll know. I stumbled out of the federal building 20 minutes later. The rain had stopped, but the sky was the color of bruised iron. I walked back to the parking garage in a daze. I didn't have a job. I didn't have access to my bank accounts. My house was a target for both the federal government and a group of violent debt collectors. I reached my truck, unlocked it, and climbed in. I just sat there in the dim light of the parking garage. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the leather notebook I had brought back from the jail. Tyler's ledger. The names, the amounts. I flipped past the pages of local business owners, past the college kids, past my own name. I went to the very back of the book. There was a section labeled Operational Overhead. I scanned the list. Server maintenance, bribes, muscle, legal retainers. And then my finger stopped on a line item near the bottom. Payment to S. Miller, FBI Seattle Field Office, $15,000, monthly. I stopped breathing. I stared at the name. I stared at the neat, meticulous handwriting. My son's handwriting. S. Miller, the woman who had just interrogated me. The woman who just told me I was the mastermind. The woman who made sure I knew they were watching my house, effectively trapping me there. I looked up at the concrete ceiling of the parking garage, my mind racing. She wasn't trying to squeeze a confession out of me. She was making sure I took the bait. Tyler didn't just have a lawyer on retainer. He had the lead investigator on the payroll. The entire interrogation was a theater production, designed to convince me that the federal government was closing in, that my only option was to rely on Tyler's instructions. He was isolating me. He took my job, he took my money, and he used a dirty Fed to terrify me into compliance. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I jumped, startled. I pulled it out. It was a text message from an unknown number. Check your glove box, Dad. I stared at the screen. I looked at the locked glove compartment in front of the passenger seat. I hadn't opened it in months. I reached over, pressed the latch, and it fell open. Sitting on top of the registration papers and the spare fuses was a thick, brown envelope. It was heavy. I pulled it out and ripped the top open. It was cash. Bundles of $100 bills, neatly wrapped in rubber bands. Easily $20,000. And sitting on top of the cash was a single folded piece of paper. I opened it. Marty got my bail approved. I'll be home by 6 p.m. Order pizza. We have a lot of work to do tonight. I stared at the slip of paper until the letters started to blur. $20,000 in cash, sitting in my glove box. I reached out and touched the rubber bands holding the stacks together. They felt dry and brittle, like they'd been sitting in a safe somewhere for years. I didn't call the police. I didn't call Agent Miller. I shoved the envelope into my leather briefcase, snapped it shut, and put the truck in gear. The drive back to Shoreline was agonizing. Every time a car stayed behind me for more than 2 blocks, my heart kicked against my ribs. Was it Miller? Was it the men with the raspy voices who called the house? By the time I pulled into my driveway, my shirt was soaked with sweat under my jacket. The house was empty. It felt like a tomb. I walked into the kitchen, dropped the briefcase on the island, and looked at the clock on the microwave. 4:15 p.m. I had less than 2 hours. Order pizza. I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it on the hardwood floor. The screen cracked diagonally. I picked it up, opened the app for the local Italian place we'd been ordering from since Tyler was in middle school, and ordered a large half-cheese, half-pepperoni. I added a side of garlic knots. It felt like a sick joke. I was ordering garlic knots for a federal criminal who happened to be my son. At 5:58 p.m., a sleek black Lincoln Navigator pulled to a stop at the curb. I stood behind the blinds in the living room, watching. The driver got out, walked around to the back, and opened the door. Tyler stepped out. He was still wearing the orange jumpsuit from the county jail, but he had a gray hoodie pulled over it. He didn't look back at the driver. He just walked up the driveway, his hands in his pockets, casual as Sunday morning. He didn't have a key. I heard the doorbell chime. I walked to the door. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled it open. Tyler brushed past me without a word. He smelled like industrial soap and stale sweat. He dropped a plastic bag containing his personal effects on the hallway table. Pizza here? He asked, walking straight into the kitchen. It's on the counter, I said, following him. I felt like a stranger in my own house, like I was a guest who had overstayed his welcome. Tyler opened the cardboard box, pulled out a slice of pepperoni, and took a bite. He closed his eyes and chewed slowly. County food is worse than the cafeteria at school. It's actually impressive how terrible it is. He looked at me. I was just standing there, staring at him. He was 17. He had a faint scattering of acne on his forehead. His shoulders were narrow. He looked exactly like the kid who used to ask me to help him build Lego sets. Did you find the glove box? He asked, wiping grease off his mouth with a paper towel. I found it, I said. My voice was hollow. Tyler, the FBI fired me today. Agent Miller came to my office. They seized my computer. They showed me the server logs. You ran your algorithm through my firm's mainframe. Tyler took another bite of pizza. I know. I needed their processing power. Your firm has enterprise-level security and raw computing speed. My laptop would have melted trying to process the volume of trades we were doing. You framed me, I yelled, the anger finally piercing through the terror. You made it look like I was the one running it. Tyler stopped chewing. He put the slice down on the box. He looked at me, and the teenager vanished again. His eyes went dead. I didn't frame you, Dad. I built a contingency, a failsafe. If everything went perfect, You would have retired in 5 years with a mystery inheritance from an anonymous benefactor, and you would have never known a thing. But things didn't go perfect. The guy at the docks got sloppy, so the failsafe tripped. He walked over to the island and tapped his finger against the leather of my briefcase. Agent Miller is on my payroll, Tyler said smoothly. Her job was to rattle you, to make sure you understood that the government is just as dangerous as the guys calling the house. You don't have a job anymore. You don't have an income. The only thing standing between you and a federal indictment is me. The only thing standing between you and the guys who want their money from the Saturday games is me. You're a sociopath, I whispered. I'm an entrepreneur, Tyler corrected him. And right now, I'm your employer. He turned around and walked toward his bedroom. I'm taking a shower. Wash this orange crap off me. Bring my backpack in here. It's under the bed in the guest room. Don't open it. I stood alone in the kitchen for a long time. The smell of the pepperoni pizza suddenly made me intensely nauseous. I looked at my briefcase. I looked down the hall toward the guest room. I didn't want to get the backpack. I wanted to take the $20,000, get in my truck, and drive until I hit the ocean. But I knew Miller was watching the house. I knew Tyler had my name plastered all over a massive criminal enterprise. If I ran, I was admitting guilt. I was trapped. I went into the guest room. I knelt down and reached under the bed. My hand brushed against heavy canvas. I pulled the backpack out. It was a standard black JanSport, the kind kids take to high school, but it weighed at least 20 pounds. I carried it to Tyler's room. He was in the master bathroom, the shower running. His door was open. I set the backpack on his bed. The vintage oak desk was still sitting there. The bottom drawer splintered from where I'd forced it open yesterday morning. It felt like a lifetime ago. I sat on the edge of his bed. I looked at the JanSport. He told me not to open it. I reached out, grabbed the zipper, and pulled it open. It wasn't money. It wasn't drugs. It was a cluster of hard drives, wired together with a thick bundle of Ethernet cables, attached to a compact, military-grade satellite uplink terminal, and sitting on top of the hardware was a manila folder. I recognized the seal on the folder immediately. It was the crest of my accounting firm. I pulled the folder out and opened it. Inside were printed dossiers, dozens of them, photographs, bank routing numbers, addresses, and family details. I flipped through the pages. The breath caught in my throat. These weren't local college kids. These weren't guys from the docks. These were the managing partners of my firm, the senior vice presidents of the logistics companies I audited, the local politicians who used our firm for their campaign finances. Tyler hadn't just used my computer to run his sports betting algorithm. He had spent the last 6 months quietly downloading the entire client database of one of the largest corporate accounting firms in Seattle. He had their tax evasion secrets. He had their slush funds. He had their offshore accounts. The water in the bathroom shut off. I froze. The folder was in my hands. The backpack was open. I told you not to open it, Dad, Tyler's voice said from the doorway. I looked up. He was standing there, a towel wrapped around his waist, dripping wet. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't angry. He just looked disappointed. What is this? I asked, my voice shaking. Tyler, this is corporate espionage. This is extortion on a massive scale. That's phase 3, Tyler said calmly, walking over and taking the folder out of my trembling hands. He tossed it back into the JanSport and zipped it shut. The sports betting was just seed capital, a proof of concept. The real money is in leveraging the secrets of people who have a lot more to lose than a Honda Civic. He walked over to his closet and pulled out a clean pair of jeans and a black t-shirt. He dropped the towel and started getting dressed right in front of me, completely unbothered. The Fed seized my front-end operation at the docks, Tyler explained, pulling his shirt over his head. They took the thin client. They took the cash on hand, which means I have to accelerate the timeline. My offshore accounts are safe, but the local liquidity is dried up. The guys who called you last night, they want $3 million by Friday. $3 million? I choked out. We don't have $3 million. I do, Tyler said, turning to face me. But it's locked in a cold storage crypto wallet, and the feds are watching the blockchain right now. If I move it, they trace the exit node. So we're going to raise the $3 million locally by Friday. He patted the JanSport backpack. Your boss, Bill, the guy who fired you today, he's been skimming off the top of the firm's retirement fund for 4 years. I have the exact transaction logs. He's going to be our first major contributor to the weekend payout. Tyler walked over to his splintered desk and pulled out a sleek secondary laptop from behind his bookshelf. He set it on the desk and plugged it into the wall. He hit the power button. The screen glowed to life. He pulled up a chair, sat down, and pointed to the empty space next to him. Pull up a chair, Dad. I didn't move. I was bolted to the floor. I'm not doing this. I'm not extorting Bill. Bill fired you to protect himself, Tyler said, not even looking at me, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. Bill gave your name to Agent Miller to make himself look cooperative. Bill would throw you in a wood chipper if it saved his pension. You don't owe him anything. It's a crime, Tyler. It's 20 years in federal prison. Tyler stopped typing. He spun the chair around to face me. Dad, listen to me. Right now, there are 3 men sitting in a gray Dodge Charger parked at the end of our street. They work for the syndicate that backed my Saturday games. They aren't cops. If we don't pay them by Friday, they will come into this house, and they will kill both of us. Not quickly, and not quietly. He let that sink in. The silence in the bedroom was suffocating. Agent Miller won't stop them, Tyler continued. She only cares about the wire transfers. She gets paid to look the other way when it comes to the street violence. We are entirely on our own. He spun the chair back around and patted the desk next to him again. So pull up a chair. I need you to draft an email to Bill. You know his tone. You know how he talks. I need it to sound like it's coming from a disgruntled former employee who just happened to take some sensitive files on his way out the door. I walked over to the desk. My legs felt like lead. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into a grave I couldn't climb out of. I looked at my son's profile, the soft curve of his jaw, the glasses pushed up on the bridge of his nose. I sat down next to him. "What's his personal email address?" Tyler asked, opening a secure encrypted mail client. I closed my eyes. The image of the men in the Dodge Charger flashed through my mind. The image of Agent Miller sliding the server logs across the metal table. The total, inescapable trap my own child had built for me. William.Harris@comcast.net, I said. Tyler typed it in. "Good. Now, tell me exactly what to write to make him sweat." I stared at the blinking cursor. I looked at the sleek matte black machine humming on the desk. Then I looked at the boy sitting next to me. He had my nose. He had Sarah's eyes. "Start with the Cayman routing numbers," I said. My voice sounded flat, hollowed out. "Tell him you know about the discrepancies in the Q3 logistics audit. Tell him you know he's been routing the employee 401k matching funds through a shell company in Delaware before depositing them." Tyler's fingers flew across the keyboard. He was smiling. It wasn't the cold, calculating smirk from the visitation room. It was a genuine, bright smile. He was having fun. He was in his element, dissecting a man's life, and he was proud that I was finally helping him hold the scalpel. "This is perfect," Tyler muttered, his eyes darting across the screen as he typed exactly what I said. "He's going to panic. He won't even try to negotiate. Finish it by telling him the wire transfer needs to hit the primary escrow account by 8 a.m. tomorrow," I said. "Tell him if it doesn't, the SEC gets an anonymous package at 8/1. Tyler hit the final keystroke with a flourish. He clicked send. He spun his chair around, leaning back and stretching his arms over his head. "See? I told you. We make a good team. You know the targets. I know the infrastructure." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm going to grab a Coke," Tyler said, standing up. "You want a beer, Dad? You look like you need one." "Sure." Tyler walked out of the room. I listened to his bare feet padding softly against the hardwood floor. I listened to the refrigerator door open in the kitchen. I turned to the laptop. The encrypted mail client was still open. The master file directory was sitting right there on the desktop. Operational overhead, offshore wallets, client blackmail. Quote, "I didn't try to steal the money. You can't steal from a ghost, and cryptocurrency is just ghost money. But I am an accountant. I spent 23 years building a life on a very simple premise. Every transaction leaves a paper trail, and every ledger has a bottom line. You just have to know who to hand the balance sheet to." I opened a new blank email. I dragged the entire master directory into the attachment field. Every spreadsheet, every chat log, every photo of the bouncers, every wire transfer receipt to Agent Miller, every single crypto key to the cold storage wallets. I attached the FAFSA forms. I attached the forged LLC incorporation documents. I typed in 3 email addresses. The Internal Affairs Division of the FBI in Washington, D.C., 3,000 miles out of Miller's jurisdiction, the lead investigative reporter for the Seattle Times, and the director of the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit. In the subject line, I typed Voluntary Corporate Disclosure and Whistleblower Submission, LLC, #449 to 821. I hit send. The progress bar flashed green. It was gone. Then I opened the hardware utility settings on Tyler's machine. I selected the master partition. I initiated a military-grade, irreversible core wipe. I heard the fridge door shut. Tyler walked back down the hallway, holding a can of Coke and a bottle of Stella. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at the laptop screen. The progress bar was at 14%. The screen was turning a harsh, terminal blue. Lines of white text were aggressively deleting the empire, sector by sector. The smugness evaporated from his face. The untouchable kingpin melted away. He dropped the drinks. They hit the floor hard, the glass bottle shattering, beer and foam spraying across the baseboards and soaking into his socks. "What did you do?" he whispered. His voice cracked. It was the first time he sounded 17 all day. "I filed our taxes," I said. I stood up from the desk. He lunged for the laptop, slamming his hands onto the keyboard, mashing the escape key, pulling the power cord out of the wall. It didn't matter. The system was locked in a root-level purge. The hardware was eating itself. "Are you insane?" Tyler screamed, his face flushing dark red, tears of pure, unadulterated panic welling behind his glasses. "The syndicate! They're outside! If the money is gone, they'll kill us!" I walked past him. I went into the living room and pulled back the heavy curtains. I looked out the window at the wet street beneath the amber glow of the streetlights. It was empty. There was no gray Dodge Charger. There had never been a gray Dodge Charger. "They aren't outside, Tyler," I said, letting the curtain fall back into place. "Because there is no syndicate waiting to kill us right now. That was just another lie. You needed me terrified so I would help you extort Bill. You needed me broken so I would work for you." Tyler stood in the hallway, his chest heaving, his hands shaking violently at his sides. He looked small, frail. "The FBI," he stammered, hyperventilating, his asthma flaring up. Miller is going to be arrested by her own agency before midnight," I said, walking to the console table by the front door. I picked up my truck keys. "The Washington, D.C. office has all her wire transfers now, and the crypto wallets are locked up in a federal evidence chain. It's over. You're broke." I slid my arms into my jacket. "Where are you going?" Tyler asked. The venom was entirely gone. He just sounded terrified. "Dad, where are you going?" "I'm going to a hotel," I said. "And tomorrow morning, I'm going to find a lawyer, a real one, and then I'm going to turn myself in to the IRS for signing those FAFSA forms without reading them." I opened the front door. The cool Seattle air hit my face, smelling of rain and wet asphalt. The heavy, suffocating weight I had been carrying for 2 days finally lifted off my chest. "You can't leave me here!" Tyler cried out, taking a step toward me. "They'll come for me. Dad, please. I looked back at him. My son, the honor roll student, the criminal mastermind, the boy who thought he could buy the world and sell his own father to pay for it. You don't need a father, Tyler, I said softly, looking him dead in the eyes. You need a better lawyer. I closed the door behind me. I walked down the driveway, got into my truck, and put it in gear. I didn't look in the rearview mirror as I drove away.